Escaping to nature is my go-to when needing to rediscover my true self and eliminate the noise of conformity. During a solo snowboard trip in New Mexico, I met psychic visionary Kim Pence, whose near-tragic car accident thrust her back into her knowing of divine guidance and altered her life forever.
My name is Kim Pence, and I live in Arroyo Seco, New Mexico, and I work with people to help them find their true selves.
What does that mean, to find your true self?
That's a great question, and this is always such a conundrum for me to answer because there's so many facets to what I do. It's hard to give myself a label like, oh, I'm a coach, or I'm a this, or I'm a mentor, or I'm a mystic, or I'm a psychic visionary, or all of these, I'm an authenticity catalyst, all of these labels. But really what I do is I am a seer. And so I see into the energy field, and I see into the soul of a person, and I also see into their core wounds, into the things that hold them back, into the patterns, into the personas that people are wearing to keep themselves safe, right? Or the programming that we've grown up with that we just take for granted, and we assume that's the way the world is, and that's what is possible for us. And I help people go from there to fully empowered, fully in their true authenticity and their soul's signature, and help them walk that journey from what I would say from the shadow self to the light, and to the person that they're meant to be, and living their most blissfully empowered life.
No matter how you label it, an amazing gift that you have to help people embody that.
Yeah, it is. I say this is what I say about what I do. I get to be part of miracles every single day, and that's what I do.
This is what you're doing currently.
Yes.
Can you kind of go to like the genesis of your story and like where your skills really started to realize that maybe I had these things? What's your background, that type of thing, like story of origin?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and I have moments along the path.
Tell me about that.
That have been awakening moments for me. When I was about 17 years old, I started studying interior design, and coming from an art background, art and studio art and studio practice was my whole upbringing. And so I chose to study interior design. And when I started working with people doing design, I realized that their lives were changing because of the things that I was doing for them. And I was fascinated. I wrote my thesis in college on the psychology between client-designer relationship and the phenomenon of the potential for growth and change for the client because of what I was doing. And all of my professors thought I was nutty and, right, who is this person that's rolling, psychology and human potential into design? And so I knew that was happening, so I decided to find out what was happening with the energy, because I've always been a seer and I see the energy of things. And I see into what I call the fabric of creation. So I'm seeing on yes, the physical level, but I'm also seeing on the energetic level. And so I decided to find out what was happening, and I found feng shui. And I studied feng shui and I became a feng shui master, but I didn't tell anyone. I didn't share it with anyone because it wasn't accepted, right? Mindfulness, meditation, none of this stuff was in the public sphere in the 80s. None of it. So I just used it as a way to help myself understand what I was doing for clients beyond the design, beyond the architecture, beyond the color analysis, all of those things that I was doing. And as I started doing that, more of my gifts started opening up. And then I started studying shamanic practices. So I've been studying shamanism for about 35 years. And And that, of course, opened the potentials more. And then fast forward significantly, I had a few awakenings along the way. I read a book called Awakening the Buddha Within when I was about 22, and the book talked to me about multidimensionality and how things really are, and what the potential of creation really is in us. And so that was an awakening, and I started looking back at my childhood and realizing that I was already doing healing work. I was already a mystic. I was already talking about human potential and creation, and didn't know the terminology, but I was working with the neuroscience of the physiology of the person that I was talking to. And I believed that healing from anything was possible. I knew that it was. I knew that beyond all knowing. And so fast forward to 2010, and along that journey, I tried to fit in. I would write, I would censor myself. I tried to be like everyone else. I tried to not be the girl who was all that I am, and to really conform and fit in and be like everyone else. And so I shut down all of my gifts. And when we do that, when we are not in our fullest potential, when we're not living in alignment with who we truly are, things like depression, right? And all of those things start creeping in and affecting us. And so I was pretty suicidally depressed because I was so disempowered. I was so disempowered, and I believed that I was so flawed that I had to conform and fit into society and not be my true self. And the more I did that, the more depressed I became. And so in 2010, I was driving from Texas to back to Illinois, where I was living at the time, and I had a near-death experience. And that was a massive awakening. And so I did go back to Source, and I had a conversation with Source, Divine, God. I call it all the same thing, Spirit. I believe it is the one divine mind. I mean, if we get to the very core of everything.
Chills. Yeah.
And that 0 point field, right? The field of all potential. And I did go back to Source and had a conversation, and I was given the opportunity to choose. I could stay non-physical and wasn't required that I come back. But then I was also given the choice to come back. But the requirement was that I would have to wake up and remember everything, remember who I truly am and what my mission or my purpose is here on earth. And that my purpose is to assist in the awakening of humanity and creating reverence for all life, and to work in what I call the timelines of miscreation. Those are timelines that we create in our lives that are based on fear. That we've made choices about whether or not we feel safe. And we miscreate along those timelines in order to conform and fit in and stay safe. And boy, did I know a lot about that. And to shift that from the timelines of miscreation to help people see those, the way that they're creating, that's not in alignment with love, with divinity, with their own divinity, because we are all a part of divinity. And to come back, and I did, obviously. And I won't go into the whole story, and that's a beautiful, incredibly mystical story of how that happened and how incredibly protected and guided I was.
Can you share a bit more about what happened to lead you to being in that space to begin with, and then what it was like to come back after making your choice?
Yeah, so I had ended my design business a number of years before, and I was searching, right? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? No, this doesn't feel authentic to me. I don't feel at home here in me doing this work. And so I closed my design practice, and I started a studio art practice, and sort of going back to my original roots of making, of being a maker. And I had been working in the studio for about 10 years and was cultivating a business and that sort of thing. And I was just so fundamentally depressed that I was so cut off and disconnected from my true self that I had been in a 16-year relationship. I knew that I needed to leave the relationship, but I was hanging on for dear life because it was what I knew, right? And I felt safe there because I was safe in that relationship, but I wasn't growing, and I wasn't stepping into what I knew was a scary path, right? I have to let go of everything I know myself to be in order to become who I am. And so I decided that I would close my art practice down, and I left, and I took off to have some space to breathe and be in my own energy and not be in a community of any kind. So I went to Marfa, Texas, an art community.
Right.
You're probably familiar with
Right.
it. And I was familiar with Marfa, and so I felt comfortable there, and it's a very tiny community, so there wasn't really any interaction for me. There wasn't any distraction for me. And the more I was with myself, the more I realized how traumatized I was. The more I realized that I was in post-traumatic stress from all of the ways that I had been trained to not be me. And all of the traumas along the way, the small T traumas and the big T traumas that I'd never really acknowledged or dealt with, abuse, those sorts of things that happen to us. And so I was leaving Marfa. I decided that I couldn't find myself right there. I was too afraid. And so I was heading back to the relationship, back to the life. I've got to go where I know something that's solid. I know something that's true, that at least I'm comfortable. And this is how we go back to our favorite familiar suffering, right? Because we know it. Energetically, we know that. But when we step into the void and the unknown, we don't know what to do with ourselves if we haven't been taught who we are as an energetic being. And I had not been taught who I was, or I'd not discovered who I was as an empath, as an intuitive, as a sensitive, as a psychic visionary, as a mystic, as all of these things that I just inherently am. And so I was going back to my comfort, to get to my comfort. And I was driving on the turnpike between Texas and Oklahoma, and I had just taken off from the toll booth and set my cruise control at 75 miles an hour. And it was the day before New Year's Eve. And I was driving on the turnpike, and it was dusk. And I realized there were no cars. I'm on a massive turnpike between Canada and Mexico, and there's no one on the road. And I'm starting to get into the Ozark Hills, where the highway starts to roll. And I looked in my rearview mirror to see if anyone was behind me. There were no cars coming towards me, no semis. And so unusual. I was like, I'm out here all alone. It's New Year's Eve. Where are people? Why aren't people going? Where is everyone? And so I looked in the rearview mirror to see if anyone was behind me. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a deer jump over the center median and land in front of the car and impact.
Oh.
And so I connected with that deer. I saw the deer. The impact happened. The car started to spin, and when the tires hit the junction between the pavement and the grass, the car started to flip. And so it flipped 6 times, and it came to a stop. But when the impact happened with the deer, I left my body, and I went back to source. And I stayed in my body, so this is like by location. My soul went back to source. I physically, Kim, stayed in the physical body, and I said to myself, I'm going to stay present, I'm going to stay awake, and I'm going to remember everything that happens.
Wow.
And so I did. So I was having these 2 experiences at the same time. The car came to a stop, and my face was on the grass, so it was up on its side. And I thought, well, I guess this is how I'm going to die, because all of the glass had blown out of the car from the impact of the rolling. And I had taken my coat off at the stop at the toll booth because I was going to be driving for 5 hours, and it was the dead of winter. So I was just in a little shirt, and I thought, wow, this is how I'm going to die.
Wow.
Now that, right, and I'm having these 2 experiences at the same time, and the lights dimmed, and the horn stopped honking, and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know if I had crossed the highway because I'd flipped so many times. I was disoriented, and I knew that no one had seen me. That's what I thought, and so I started searching around for my phone. Couldn't find my phone, and I just thought, well, if this is what's meant to be, then it is, and I just surrendered. And a few minutes later, I heard a voice say, "Is there anyone alive in there?" And it was a man, and he said, I want you to undo your seatbelt and duck." I was in a convertible.
Oh.
And he cut the top of the convertible open. He said, "I think the car is going to blow up. I can smell the gasoline, and I need to get you out of there." And so he cut the top of the car open and pulled me out. And he asked me if I was alone, and I said yes. And then another man came up the hill, and they picked me up and carried me down about a 15-foot hill. So I had flipped the car up on top of this hill. And they carried me down the hill and laid me down on the grass, and he took his jacket off and covered me up, and the 2 men went off to find a mile marker so they could call for help. And his wife was there, and when they laid me down, she said, "Everything is going to be okay. I am an emergency room nurse from the local hospital." And the first thing that I asked her was, "Is the deer going to be all right?"
Oh, of course, that's what you asked. Oh.
And so that was the experience, and then it fast forward to the hospital, and they did all of the requisite tests to find out if there was any internal bleeding or any broken anything, and there was nothing.
So at what point were you having this conversation with Source?
So while all of the car was moving, and while I was being taken out of the car and taken to the hospital, and all of the things that went on at the hospital, I was back at Source having this conversation. Well, there was also the part of me, so we are multifaceted, right? We're multidimensional. And so the part of me that had the experience and the trauma of the wreck was still lying on the grass beside the car, even though my physical body was in the hospital. So I was pretty fractured, and I recognized as I was with Source that I was seeing all of these parts of me that had been fractured, so I knew where to go and get them to bring myself back together again when I was finally lucid enough and back on earth enough to be able to do that. So that's when I was having that conversation, and as I was having the conversation and deciding to come back, that I re-entered my body while I was being released from the hospital, because there was nothing wrong with my physical body.
Amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I walked out of the hospital. Yeah, and walked into my new life, and a few days later, I was out of the trauma energy enough to. I was standing at the back door of my house in Illinois, and it all came like. All of my remembering came back in, and everything was fully open again. All of my psychic abilities, I could hear, see, feel, know in the invisible world. I could hear people talking in their minds. All of those gifts were back open, and I could see again. I could see into the anomalies, whether you've got a health issue, or you've got unhealed trauma, or you've got a childhood wound that's missing, or a piece of your shadow, and all of those things were back, and I was fully awake, and I started remembering my whole entire life and all of my past lives. So that's sort of that story. And from that experience, I sat down with my partner at the time, and I said, I have to go.
Wow.
I have to leave. This is not my life. I have to go. And so I put my clothes in the car, and I left, and I walked away from the home, the family, the money, all of it, and just started my journey. And that was in 2010.
Wow. In that, it seemed that what you were saying earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you were saying earlier is that you're kind of like holding on to that familiarity. And after you have, I don't know what a better word for it, download, acceptance of who you truly are, and being fully awake, was it just like easy to be like, this is who I am, I have to go? Were there emotions attached to it that you had to kind of push through, or was it, what did it feel like?
It was emotional. I was walking away from everything that I knew and everything that I had created into a complete void. And so it was also emotional to let go of the relationship, the home, all of my life, but the call was so clear that there was no way not to say, I have to go. There was no way to override that knowing. And I do remember saying, I remember, because I had also shut down my connection to source, right? I had conformed to the point where I had disconnected, even though we can't really ever disconnect. I had disconnected from that knowing, from that support network of my team of light beings, the council that I work with, and all of the creator beings that I work with, and source itself. And so when I said I say yes, I'm here, and I'm willing. I said, please just let me be a clear and open channel for divine grace and healing energy to flow through me. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 12 years, is becoming that clear channel, and facing myself, and facing my own shadow, and facing my trauma, and learning how to heal these things, and learning how to become who I am, that is incredibly empowered person to create anything, and anything that I want to create. I know that I am capable, and to be in such reverence for the path that I've walked, and where I've been, and what I've come through. And I've walked through the fires of hell and back to get to where I am. That was not an that was not an easy task. But I know that everything that I've experienced has given me a tool to be able to teach others how to heal themselves, because not everybody is going to be me and walk through what I've walked through. And we're all unique individual facets, right, of the divine. So I know that my work is to is to be that way shower. My work is not to heal anyone. My work is to teach others how to heal themselves. And that's what I do.
Magnificent.
Yeah.
You said that you've always been a seer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your first time, like what that was like?
You know, as a little girl, seeing was so natural to me. I just thought that everyone was like me. And so I didn't realize that other people didn't see the way I saw. So for me to say, well, I will tell you, the first time that I remember seeing was when I was being born.
Oh, wow.
And I remember coming out of the womb and seeing the field, the energy field that I was just part of. I knew that I was just, I'm just part of everything that's here. But also seeing in the way of seeing as humans see was different for me. So I understood the contrast of seeing with the physical eyes, even though, right, our eyes are closed when we're born, I could see. In that way, I could see the physicality of the people and the environment that I was in, but I was also seeing multidimensionally, and that was the contrast that made me understand, oh, okay, there are two ways of seeing. But then as a little girl and being a seer, and having people be uncomfortable with me being able to see what was going on with them, right? Yeah. That's when I started shutting that down. I was like, oh, that's inappropriate. Like, I can't do that, right? And so it was learning how to be human that disconnected me from my authenticity, but that was the journey in order to understand how to truly be human, right?
Wow. For those who have no clue what any of this means or what it's like, or have forgotten perhaps, how can you explain these different like fields and dimensions to a person and etc. to help us better understand for those that are unfamiliar?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing to understand is everyone has all of these abilities. And we have cultivated them and learned them as a skill to a certain degree, depending on how many lifetimes that we've had as an embodied human. And so some people have cultivated more ability than others, and most of us are talked out of them when we're very small. Right? Your invisible friend is real, right? You're just seeing into a different dimension. But the adults, we shut it down over time. So adults are less familiar with their own ability to see at that level. And so they dismiss what you're seeing. Oh, I know, your invisible friend, or that sort of, right? That sort of dismissiveness of that ability. And so just understanding that there are three aspects to us. We are, yes, a physical being, a primal self, the animal that we are. We're an animal. And we are also a soul that is embodied in the physical body. So there's a co-creation happening between the physical body and the soul. And then what enlivens all of that? What brings life to this? The breath, right? That is your spirit, inspiration. Right? So there are three aspects to us, and we can all cultivate being able to understand and see and hear spirit, and to feel spirit, and to know, right? So the different clairs, we can cultivate those things.
Your skills and everything came back to you. And then you left the life behind that you had cultivated and you knew. Where did you travel to, and how did you know where to go? And then how did you get to where you are now?
Okay. Yeah. So when I left, I went to school in Houston, design school, and so I had cultivated a pretty big community there, and I knew the city very well, and I felt at home there because I'd spent my young adult life there, and so I went to Houston, and I lived in a friend's house that was she was living in a different city at the time, and so I lived in her house, and yeah, I just began walking this path of figuring out who I really am and how to navigate the world with all of the abilities that I had open, and that was a bit of a journey, and just asking for teachers and guides and support, and I applied to the Peace Corps, and at the same time I asked, I was just visiting with my friend whose house I was living in, and I said, if any of your friends ever need a personal assistant who can do all of these things, and I listed off all of the abilities that I had in the physical world, you know, I can manage an art collection, and I can, you know, renovate a house, and I can sell property, and I can do all of these things. I had also been trained as a chef along the way, and so was a professional cook for a while. And I said, let me know. I would love to be of service in some way to someone. And this is how am I going to spend my time, right? And I'm brand new here.
I love it.
What am I going to do with myself, and how am I going to support myself? And so I had been applying to the Peace Corps, and on the day that I got the acceptance letter to the Peace Corps, I got a phone call from a woman saying, I hear that you're looking for a job as a personal assistant. I'm dying of ovarian cancer, and I need some help to move through the end of my life, and to take care of my estate, and my husband of 50 years and all of those things. And so I had that choice point. Do I do something that I've wanted to do since I was a child? Go into the Peace Corps and be of service in that way? I was looking for, how can I be of service? I have no idea really who I am or what I'm capable of. I have no idea. I know that I have these healing abilities, but I don't know how to use them. I don't know anything about this world. I knew nothing about the spiritual world. I had been completely disconnected. And I wasn't really super familiar with being in my body, right? Because I was now fully embodied. My spirit, my soul had fully embodied into the body, and I was not living, you know, what I'd call like a half-life. You know, I'm half here, I'm half not. And so I began studying yoga in order to learn how to use my body. And I decided, okay, do I want to go into the unknown again and go to a foreign country and take myself out of some sort of foundation that is familiar enough to me where I can actually go inside and do the work that I really need to do, and know that I'm supported and I have a network here? Or do I want to, I mean, what greater gift can you give someone than to help them through the end of their life? And so I decided to take the job.
Okay.
And was a personal assistant. And those skills started to come in because I could see what was going on with her, and I could help her husband, who's losing his beloved of 50 years. They'd been married.
Wow.
I could help him navigate losing her and then stepping into his life as a single man. And so I spent 7 years doing that while I was doing my healing work, while I was learning who I am. And I began to remember my feng shui practices and my shamanic studies and all of the, you know, I've always been a deep diver into being curious about energy and human potential and neuroscience and the quantum field and quantum mechanics and all of these things that I'd just been curious about and just been my natural way, started to come back in and sort of weave back through me to help me make sense of my world and this new person that I was becoming. And as I was working and working with her, helping her through the end of her life, and then working with him, helping him into his new life, and I was doing all of these things to help myself, I started investigating spiritual communities and asking questions and saying, okay, I need to understand what I am doing and how I can turn this into my life. Mm-hmm. How can I live as me? Mm-hmm. How can I literally live my life and be of service and make a living just by being who I am? Mm-hmm. That was the question. That was the catalyst for the life that I live now, which is I literally am who I am.
How nice.
Right? Yes. Fully like, okay, I'm out of the closet, right?
Yeah.
I'm the forest witch, I'm the girl who sees, I'm all of these things, and I love who I am, right? And I live beyond my wildest dreams. I literally live a life that I could never have dreamed was possible. To be so alive and so in love with life, and so to manifest people like you into my life, right? That's how I live, just in a mystical world where magic and miracles happen, and I listen and I follow the guidance that comes, and then the next step unfolds, right? I'm not making anything happen. I'm just following the path and walking every step. And what's the next step? And what's the next step? And when we do that, when we say yes, everything that is holding you back from living that life is going to come up. Your shadow is going to come up, your reasons why not, your fears, all of the traumas that you buried in your subconscious because you didn't know how to resolve them. So it's that balancing act. It's that walking, right, in the waves and particles of life and flowing like the ocean. The wave comes in and it goes out, and it comes in and it takes with it everything that's not meant to be, right? And it cleans the beach. So living that life. And when I realized, okay, I need some training to understand how I function, I studied Barbara Brennan's work, Hands of Light, who is an energy healer, and I studied Donna Eden's work, energy healing, energy medicine, and I found one of my teachers, one of my mentors, and I studied with her. I still study with her, and I sat down in her healing space. The very first time I met her, I went to have a session with her, a healing session, an energy healing session, to see whether or not she was a good fit for me to work with. Is she my teacher? I sat down in her healing space, and she said, "Who are you? What do you do? How many clients do you have? Where's your office?" And I was like, what? No, I'm just coming for healing. I have no idea what you're talking about. She started talking about all of the different things that she teaches. And she said, "Oh, you are ready.
Oh.
You are ready to have your own business, to have your own, walk your own path." And she said, "I want you to come to the advanced workshop that I'm teaching next weekend." And I was like, no, wait a minute. Isn't there like a basic entry level, and I knew about the chakras, and I'd studied some of those things in my shamanic training, but I didn't understand it as a business and as a path, right? And so she talked me into going to the advanced workshop, and then I was there, and I was remembering, oh, I already know all of this. I'm just waking up and remembering it. So it's like she handed me the keys to unlock what I already knew. And so she taught me to do that with others. So that's what I do, is, yes, I'm a seer, and I help people recognize what is going on that they can't see, and hand them the keys and say, "You unlock it. Here, I'm going to teach you the tools to become self-empowered, to become your own inner authority, to become multidimensional and understand yourself as multidimensional being that you are." And then you go on your way. You become your beautiful master self. this is one of the things that I love more than anything in the world, is I love working with visionaries and leaders and creatives who don't know that they are.
Oh, I bet.
And then watching them transform and grow and become their most aligned, empowered selves is just like, I have the best job on the face of the earth. Like, I get to do this? This is crazy pants.
Absolutely.
It's such a miracle. I literally am a walking miracle. Literally, right? Going from suicidally depressed, suicidal ideation, how can I check out? Right? And I remember the prayer that I said before I left for Marfa, before I left my relationship and left for Marfa. I said, okay, whoever is up there, because remember I had been separated, I believed that there was nothing helping me. I said, okay, universe, I am not living this way anymore. You either take me out of here or teach me how to heal myself, because that's it. I'm not living this way anymore. I am living in hell on earth. And if this is all there is, I gotta go.
Yeah.
I gotta go. Can't live this way.
Well, I'm so glad that the call that was answered, and here you are helping us all. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time and give a younger you some words of advice, or some just words, what age would you have been, and what would you say?
It's a great question. Ooh, that's such a juicy question. I think I would say to my 7-year-old self, because there was a pretty pivotal experience at 7 where I intentionally said, okay, I have to shut down now and I have to conform to fit in, or I'm not going to be able to function here. I would say to her, hang on, it's all going to work out and it's going to be better than you could ever imagine.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would just say, hang on, it's going to be a bumpy ride, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You get through it.
Very nice. What can we do on an individual basis to get more comfortable with hearing or listening to whatever that voice is, or that feeling that's inside of us, to move in a direction that's more aligned with us as a whole?
Okay. This is a beautiful question, and I asked it myself, and I channel, and I channel writing and that sort of thing, so I'm always asking divine intelligence for answers to these really important questions that we need to understand as humans. And I asked that question, and the answer that I know that is the most supportive and beneficial is that you have to be willing to be uncomfortable in order to change. But the advice does not say that you will be uncomfortable. It says that you need to be willing to be uncomfortable. It says that you need to be willing to be uncomfortable. And if you're willing, that it transforms that discomfort into an openness. It releases our resistance to change. And it helps us balance in the chaos of change and see the potential that's there on the other side, and the value of that potential of the other side of the change, of letting go of something that, it may be entertaining, or it may be your zone of comfort, which is what most of us are trying to hold on to, is to hold on to that zone of comfort, because what is familiar to us, we want to pull in. And this is vibrational, so I have to go into a little bit of energy talk to explain this. So we are magnets. Our energy field is magnetic. That's how we manifest, right? If people talk about manifestations and the law of attraction and all of that, they're talking about our energetic magnetic field. So, as human beings, what is familiar to us energetically, we magnetize to us. What is unfamiliar to us energetically, we push away. So that's why it's challenging for us to try new things, because we don't know the outcome. Right? And we don't, our mind, our logical mind doesn't know whether or not it's going to be beneficial or non-beneficial. And the mind wants proof of certainty that the outcome is good before it will attempt something.
Makes sense.
Right? And so when we understand that energetically we're pulling towards us experiences that are familiar, well, they can be our favorite familiar suffering. We're going to constantly go back, go back, go back. That's why people who are in abusive relationships go back. That we can't explain it. Why would you do that? Because it's familiar, because the unknown is too scary. But if you'll be willing to be in the unknown and know that there's this beautiful golden net below you saying, come, I've got you. Come on. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be even better than your wildest dreams. But you have to let go of what you have in order to achieve what it is you want. Right? If that space is filled, right? And in quantum physics, we have a space. If that space is already full, nothing else can come in. Right? But if we empty that space out of what we don't need, what we don't want, what is familiar and maybe okay, but it's not the thing, right? It's not the desire, it's not the dream. Then we empty that space out and we have this beautiful empty space. Then our true self can come in and occupy that space, and then we're led. So being brave, it takes some courage, right? You have to be courageous, and you have to have that fire that says, I can't stay here. This is not my life. I love you. I have to go. And be willing to walk into the unknown, and that's where we cultivate faith. The faith, right? People are taught that love and fear are opposites. Love has no opposite. The divine has no opposite. What is actually opposite of fear is faith. And it's in our energy field. It's an energy that we can tap into. And I could go into a whole conversation about what's in each chakra and where things are located in our energy field and all of that teaching that's so beautiful. But the one important thing to know energetically about ourselves, and if you're going to start walking on that path to your true authenticity and your true empowerment, is to know that faith is in front of our heart chakra in our energy field, where you open your hands, where you're receiving. Right? I am willing to not know, but I'm willing to be shown. And fear is in the exact opposite direction in the back of our heart chakras. That stops us from moving forward. Oh, I'm too afraid. I don't know what's going to happen. So when we start to understand ourselves energetically, which is one of the things I teach people, is how to understand yourself as the empath, as the intuitive, as the sensitive, as the human being, right? But a soul having a human experience, you are energy, and we're not taught about our energetic selves, how to understand ourselves energetically, and that's one of the things I love teaching the most is, who are you? Right? You are this. You are a multifaceted diamond. And there are many, many facets to you. And this is an octahedron. It's the building block of creation.
Wow. I noticed you were holding it in your hand.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is what we're made out of. And when we start to understand ourselves multidimensionally, there's so much more going on to in the universe than I realized. There's so much more going on in my life than I realized. Why did I meet my beloved? Right? Well, there's a contract, right? And you all are co-creating together, right? And you're either co-creating in harmony or you're co-creating in disharmony, but you're reflecting to each other where you have growth, where you need to transform, where you need to heal, right? And that's not the work to be done together. It's the work to be done on your own, but as the beauty of the reflection of your beloved.
So beautiful. Thank you.